It must have been a great musical education working on so many sessions in so many different styles. And of course, later in your career, you became famed for being able to put so many styles into a single album. Did that come from the session years?
No, it really comes from before, my musical taste and, what you call like an eclectic taste. It was there right from the early days, really. And I think what it was the fact that the 6 strings of a guitar and how that could be sort of performed and exhibited, whether it was on nylon strings and the sort of more classical approach, or steel strings acoustic and the sort of blues, country blues playing, or the electric and the various styles of that, like bottleneck guitar and everything from sort of Les Paul through to rockabilly, etc., etc. I was there. I had a voracious appetite for all of it, and I was taking it in. So I'd already had that going on before I was going to art school, you see. So when I got the opportunity, when they took me into this sort of the bosom of like the music industry, which was the studio world, well, then I was not just a one-trick pony. I had all these different things. I didn't even realize it, but I could play acoustic. I mean, I knew I could do it, but I didn't know that they would take somebody on who was that versatile, because you'd think that, okay, they just want somebody who can do sort of, R&B or whatever. But no, it was right across the board.
Now, in 1966, you joined the Yardbirds. Had you been feeling that urge to be in a band, to be out front on stage rather than just in the back room?
Well, I guess everyone might have heard this story, but I'm going to tell you that it was absolutely true. That when I went into the studio world, I could read chord charts, but I couldn't read the sort of dots and musical notation for real. But as time went on, I could. And as I said, I was doing all these various sessions, from sort of TV jingles to film music to this, to that, to blues, to folk, to on and on and on. And I got hired to an unusual studio. It wasn't one of the ones on the usual sort of Decca, EMI and Pi. And I had like quite a lot of music in front of me, and I had to start reading it. And I just kept turning the pages, and it didn't stop. It just kept going on. It was getting really tricky. And I realized, well, it didn't take long to realize that it was a Muzak session. And I thought, what am I doing here? This is just really not what I'm cut out for, especially as I'd sort of introduced like the overdrive pedal, the fuzz box into the whole recording scene, and people were using them on stage, and I was sort of quite keen on some experimental things like the bow, etc., with the guitar, and I thought it's time to get out. So with this, with the Yardbirds, Jeff Beck and I go back to probably just after the Choir Boy photograph. We really were, well, when we met up, we both had like 2 homemade guitars, so that's how far we go back. So I used to go along with Jeff to the Yardbirds concerts, and there was an explosion one night, and the producer and the bass player, the same person, Paul Samuel Smith, decided to leave the band, and there was a big row between him and Keith Ralph, and he went off. That was the end of it. He wasn't going to come back in the band, and they were stuck, and they had the marquee coming up, and I said, well, I said, what are we going to do? Would you come and join the band? Chris Dreyer, who was a rhythm guitarist, didn't feel confident to do the bass, so I said, well, I'll do it then. And that's sort of how it worked. And Jeff and I had spoken a lot about doing like dual lead guitars, like the equivalent of like big band, what we knew as big band anyway, where you'd have like the trumpet sections and the saxes and that sort of aspect of an attack and assault on the audience really with it. We didn't really get that far with it. We did a bit of it, but then there were more fireworks and leaving and that in the Yardbirds.
Now, in retrospect, kind of legend sees this lineup of the Yardbirds as the 2 amazing stars of British electric guitar. But I guess at that stage, Jeff must have been the star, presumably.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, because the work that he'd done in the Yardbirds was phenomenal. Because we know that there was Eric and then Jeff, but most of the work that Eric did was with that Live at the Marquee, the 5 Live Yardbirds. But the work that Jeff did, he really brought it all on in leaps and bounds.